In today's biased news, the elderly are sacrificed for profits, the US flexes nuclear muscle towards North Korea, and a show of solidarity in the film industry. We're trying to work people to death again, this time by raising the retirement age. This has understandably sparked global protest against such measures, one notable example being the riots in France. In 2018, for the first time, people in the so-called developed world over the age of 65 outnumbered those under 5, reducing hopes of continued economic growth in these aging economies. Attempts to resolve this new contradiction of capitalism have converged around forcing the elderly into a longer work life. This presents many issues, as working-age populations, meaning 25 to 64 years old, produce more than they consume. Commentary on slowing national GDP growth is prefaced with how per capita GDP could potentially remain stable, supposedly better reflecting the well-being of the population. One approach that is suggested is the investment of accumulated wealth in old age, which could yield returns that still grow the economy despite reduced productivity and labor force participation. Other suggestions include retooling industry towards more automation and measures to increase productivity. More sinister is the Japanese example being touted as a success, where the retirement age has been raised to 65 and new laws have been put in place for companies to retain their workforce till the age of 70. Currently, 1 in 4 people older than 65 are still working. One article stated, quote, "To make working conditions better for the older population, Japan provides subsidies to companies to provide facilities such as railings on staircases and extra rest areas for older workers." A demographics field expert commenting on this stated that, quote, "There could be health consequences for raising the retirement age across the board. A construction worker may not be able to continue working at 70 as much as a person who has a desk job." According to current research, raising the age at which people can receive pensions forces the elderly to opt for disability insurance as people suffer physical health and mental health consequences. As always, human life and well-being are sacrificed on the altar of profits solely to benefit the smallest sliver at the top, to the detriment of the rest of society. The United States Air National Guardsman who was accused of leaking classified documents earlier this year has just been indicted on 6 separate federal charges, each of which carries a sentence of up to 10 years in prison and fines of up to $250,000 apiece. This should be a reminder to be careful when leaking classified documents on Discord, even though it is very funny. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken is scheduled to visit China, marking the most senior U.S. official visit to the U.S.'s economic rival since 2019. It's stated that the visit aims to improve communications channels, address disagreements, and prevent miscalculations between the two countries. The focus is on managing competition and maintaining open channels of communication while avoiding conflict. The visit follows recent engagements and meetings between top US and Chinese officials. Both sides are exploring the possibility of improving their relationship, though there are still sticking points and low levels of mutual trust. Blinken is expected to discuss issues such as detained Americans, US tariffs, and sanctions, while Beijing will likely raise concerns about confrontational behavior around Taiwan and restrictions on Chinese companies. The outcome of the visit and its impact on US-China relations remains uncertain. A US nuclear-powered submarine, classified as an SSGN, or cruise missile sub, has arrived at a South Korean port. This is the first visit of this type of submarine to South Korea in nearly 6 years. The visit is intended as a show of force against the DPRK, and Biden has promised to send a nuclear-armed submarine next, for the first time since the 1980s, marking a dangerous escalation of military posturing in the region. In Ukraine war news, over 20 soldiers from the Ukrainian Azov Battalion, an openly Nazi elite armed forces group, who were taken prisoner during fighting in Ukraine, have gone on trial in southern Russia, and could face up to life in prison. This fate is not shared by all Azov POWs, as Russia controversially traded many of them for their own POWs and other persons of interest last year. While opinions on the conflict vary, we can all agree that life in prison is too kind a fate for Nazis anywhere in the world. Bill Gates and Xi Jinping met for a private conversation on Friday, marking Xi's first meeting with a Western businessman in years. While the US war machine is desperately trying to start a conflict with China, private capital seems to be aware of the changing tides, as Gates is not the first American businessman to visit China in recent months. And in positive news of the day, Janitors who lost their jobs in Hollywood as production was stopped due to writers' union protests joined the picket lines outside of Sony Pictures and Amazon Studios yesterday, exemplifying the core values of class solidarity. This is just the latest example of the rising class consciousness around the world. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. If you'd like to see episodes with more in-depth analysis, consider supporting the show on Patreon so we can grow and expand.